Della Hart had 3 weeks to sell a dead woman's house, and exactly one person in town who could make it happen in time. Me, the man she left standing on a dock 9 years ago. I found out the way I find out everything around here, secondhand, at the hardware counter, from a man who didn't know he was handing me a live wire. Rosa Hart's place was going on the market. The niece was back to handle it, and the sale had to close fast because the niece was getting married at the end of the month, 1,100 miles inland, to a man with a steady job and a good name, and she wanted the last thread tying her to this town cut clean before she walked down the aisle. 3 weeks. That was the clock. Sell the house, bury the past, go get married. And the house, I knew that house. I'd been not looking at it for 9 years. It was rotting quietly at the seams, damp in the back rooms, a porch rail hanging by a prayer. No agent was going to move it in 3 weeks without somebody who knew old houses putting hands on it first. There was one of those in town. There was me. So when her lawyer called the yard and asked in a careful voice whether I did that kind of work, I want you to understand what was actually being asked. He was asking whether the man Della Hart left would spend the last 3 weeks before her wedding alone in her childhood home, fixing it up so she could sell it and marry somebody else. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I told myself it was the work. I always tell myself it's the work. I did not know yet that there was a tin under the floor of that house with my name on it, buried 9 years deep. I didn't know that the same 3 weeks she'd hired me to close the door on this town for good were going to be the 3 weeks it all came open instead. I just knew she was back. There was a clock running, and for the first time in 9 years, I had a reason to be in the same room as her that neither of us could say no to. Turns out that's all it takes. A dead woman's house, a wedding on a deadline, and one nail rusted loose in a floorboard. Let me tell you how it came apart. My name's Sam Kessler. I'm 35. I build boats, wooden ones, the kind almost nobody wants anymore, at the yard my father left me, down at the end of the harbor where the road runs out. I'm the man this town calls when something's broken and they don't want to fuss about it. A hull, a dock, a screen door. I show up, I fix it, I go home. I've made a whole life out of being the quiet one, and for 9 years I was very good at believing one thing, that Della Hart left this town at 23 and never thought about it again. I had proof, see? After she left, there was nothing. No letter, no call, not a card at Christmas. I'd hear things sometimes. She's inland now, she's got a good job, she's doing well, and every piece of it landed on me like another nail in the same board. She was gone. She'd chosen a bigger life. I wasn't in it. And a man can build something solid out of a fact like that if he stops arguing with it. So I stopped arguing. I ran the yard. I fixed the town's broken things. And I told myself the silence was an answer. Now the woman who'd handed me that silence had hired me to help her seal it shut for good. 3 weeks of work, cash on completion, so she could sell the house and drive off to a wedding. If you want to know what kind of man I am, it's the kind who took that job, who looked at the worst possible way to spend 3 weeks and said yes because it came with her name attached. I'll get to the boat under the tarp in my shop. It matters, and I'm not ready yet, which, it'll turn out, is exactly the thing I'd been doing to myself for 9 years. Della and I grew up on the same water. Her Aunt Rosa raised her. Her folks weren't in the picture, and Rosa's house sat 3 docks down from my father's yard, close enough that I heard Della before I ever really knew her. She had a laugh that carried across the water like it was looking for someone. We found each other the way you do in a place that small. Slow, then all at once. By the time we were 21, there wasn't a version of my day that didn't have her in it. She'd sit on an overturned bucket in the shop while I worked and talk at me for hours, and I'd say one word to her 10, and somehow that was the most either of us had ever talked to anyone. She used to say I was the only quiet that didn't feel like being alone. But Della grew up with nothing, and nothing leaves a mark. She wanted out, not out of me, out of the smallness, the leaking roofs, The winters where the whole town holds its breath till the boats go back in the water. When the chance came, a nursing program inland, a door out, she took it. I've never once blamed her for that. Here's the part I blame myself for. She stood on my dock the morning she left and she waited. Didn't say for what. Just stood there with her bag over her shoulder and gave me this long look, and I knew then, if I'm honest, that she was giving me a chance to say something. Ask her to stay. Ask to come. Anything. And I'm the quiet kind. So I said, drive safe. I said, let me know you got in okay. She didn't. That was the last I heard from her for 9 years, until a lawyer called with a job and a deadline. She was there the first morning I came to work on the house. I came around the side with my tool bag, and she was on the back step with a coffee, a folder of listing paperwork open on her knee, already working, already on the clock. And I stopped dead like I'd walked into a wall. 9 years. Her hair was shorter. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. And she was still, without any effort at all, the only person I've ever had trouble looking straight at. Sam Kessler, she said, not surprised. She'd known it'd be me. She was the one who signed off on the hire. They sent the whole town's handyman. They sent the guy who works cheap, I said. You never worked cheap in your life. You just never charged people you liked. 9 years, gone in 2 lines. Then she looked back down at her folder, all business, because business was the wall she'd decided to put up. I need it list ready in 3 weeks. Damp in the back 2 rooms, the porch, whatever the inspector's going to flag. Can you do 3 weeks? I can do 3 weeks. Good. She didn't look up. I've got a lot happening at the end of the month. And there it was on her left hand, catching the light while she pretended to read. A ring. Simple, real, the kind a steady man gives a woman he means to keep. His name's Marcus, she said, still not looking at me, like saying it to the paperwork made it safer. The wedding's the 30th. That's the deadline. That's why the rush. I'm glad, I said. And I was. That's the miserable part. Congratulations. She finally looked up at me then, and something crossed her face that I couldn't read, and she put it away fast. Just fix the house, Sam, she said. Quiet, almost kind. Please. So I did. Or I started to. And here's the thing nobody tells you about being hired to repair the house of the woman you never got over, 3 weeks before she marries someone else. You are in her childhood bedroom with a crowbar and a radio and 8 hours to fill, and she is 20 feet away on the phone with a florist, and every single day the 2 of you get a little more used to the sound of each other again. That's the trap. Not the work. The getting used to it. By the end of the first week, she'd stopped hiding in the paperwork. She'd bring me coffee. She'd sit on the bucket. She found a bucket, of course she did, and talk at me while I worked, same as she was 21, and I'd say 1 word to her 10, and we both felt the 9 years getting thinner, and neither of us said a thing about it. There was a wedding on the 30th. There was a clock. We both kept our eyes on the clock so we wouldn't have to look at each other. Then I pulled up the floorboard in her old room, and the clock stopped mattering. It was the damp that did it. The board in the corner of her bedroom had gone soft, and I got the crowbar under it to pull it for replacing, and it came up too easy, 1 rusted nail letting go, and underneath was a tin, one of those old shortbread tins, gone soft with rust at the corners. Too heavy for what it was, and inside it, a stack of letters, tied up with a length of boat twine gone stiff with age. Every single one had my name on it, her handwriting. That fast, leaning hand, I'd have known it anywhere, in the dark, 9 years later. Dozens of envelopes, and it took me a second, kneeling there, to understand what I was holding, because not one of them had a stamp. Not one had ever been mailed. She'd written them and sealed them and hidden them under the floor of her own bedroom, under the exact board she'd hired me to come fix, which meant some part of her had to have known when she made the call that I might be the one to find them. I put the whole stack in my truck. I did not read one at the house. She was in the next room, and whatever was in those envelopes, I wasn't going to let her watch my face read it. I finished the day's work with my hands not quite steady. I told her the back room would need another coat. I drove home with a tin on the seat beside me, like something that might wake up. And that night, in my shop, under the one light I keep on, with the boat under its tarp in the dark behind me, I opened the oldest one, the spring she left. "Sam, I got in okay. You asked me to let you know, and then I didn't, and I've been sick about it for 3 days, so I'm writing it down instead, where it can't make anything worse. The apartment's small, and it smells like other people's cooking, and last night I heard a foghorn on the TV in the next unit, and I cried so hard I scared myself, because for 1 second I thought I was home. I picked up the phone to call you 4 times today, 4 times. And every time I thought, what do I even say? Come get me? I'm the one who left. I don't get to be homesick out loud. So I'm putting it here instead. I'm going to tell you everything, Sam. I just can't ever let you hear it. No love, Della. No signature at all." I sat down on the floor of my own shop. 35 years old, and I sat down like my legs just quit. 4 times. She'd reached for the phone 4 times that first day, while I spent that same day telling myself the silence meant she was fine. And there were dozens more envelopes in that tin, 9 years of them, which meant the woman I'd been hired to help walk away forever had, in fact, been writing to me the whole time she was gone, and burying every word. And now I had 11 more days alone in her house with her. 11 days of her bringing me coffee and talking on the bucket and counting down to a wedding, while I knew. That was the new shape of the job. Fix the house, keep the secret. Watch the clock run out on both of us. I couldn't do it. But I read them first, one a night. Every letter answered one question and opened a worse one. Year 2, she was angry, not at me, at herself for not being over it on schedule. "I gave it a year," she wrote. "I was supposed to be done missing you by now. There should be a rule. 1 year, then it lets go of you. Nobody told me it doesn't work like that." So she'd missed me at least a year. That answered something and opened the next. How long then? Year 4 gave me an answer I didn't want. "I met someone, Sam. His name's Marcus. He's kind, he's steady, and when he talks about the future, he says we like it's easy. I'm telling you the way I tell you everything, into a drawer you'll never open. He's good, he's just not you, and I hate that I noticed." Marcus, 4 years back. The same Marcus she was marrying on the 30th. The good man had been the runner-up in a tin for 5 years and never known it. That should have been where the letters stopped. She had someone. But the tin didn't stop at year 4. There were 5 more years under that stack. She'd kept writing me after Marcus, after the ring, near enough. And I couldn't understand why a woman builds a good life with a good man and keeps writing the one she left, unless the door had never actually closed. Year 7 told me, "I don't imagine you writing back anymore. I used to. For years I had the letter you'd send memorized. I don't do that now. I only know I still can't stop. You're the person I talk to, Sam. You always were. I just built you a version that lives in a tin, because that one can't ever tell me it's over." And I finally understood. She hadn't gone silent because she stopped. She'd gone silent for the exact same reason I'd never been able to finish the thing under the tarp in my shop. As long as you never hear the word over out loud, you get to keep the person. Which brings me to the boat. I'm ready now. The spring she left, I started building her a boat. A little wooden sailing dinghy, 16 feet, the kind you build for one specific person. I told myself it was to keep my hands busy. I planked the hull, faired it, and started painting the name on the transom. And then the weeks went by with no word, and one day I set the brush down and never picked it up again. The name's still there, half finished. 4 letters and the start of a 5th. I threw a tarp over the whole thing so I wouldn't have to look at it, and for 9 years I didn't. Because you finish a boat like that, you're saying she's coming back to see it. Leave it unfinished, and some cowardly part of you gets to keep pretending the story isn't over. Her tin under a floor, my boat under a tarp. 9 years, 3 docks apart, and neither of us ever once made a sound. The house was done a day early. Of course it was. I'm good, and I'd had every reason to make it last and did it fast anyway, because dragging it out felt like lying. Which meant the morning came, the 29th, the day before her wedding, when there was nothing left to fix and a tin in my truck and a choice. I decided to give the letters back and say nothing. Hand her the tin, tell her the board came up, tell her I hadn't read them. Let her keep her secret and her ring and her wedding and the clean cliency she'd hired me for. It was the decent thing. It was also, and I knew it even then, the exact same move I'd made at 23 on that dock. Say the safe thing, let her go, call my cowardice a kindness. I drove to the house on the 29th with the tin wrapped back up in its twine. She was on the back step. Last time. Boxes in the car, everything closed up, keys ready to hand to the agent. 1 day on the clock. She looked out at the water and said, not really to me, I keep thinking I'll feel something leaving. I didn't feel anything coming back, and I keep waiting to feel something going. Maybe that means I finally got it out of my system. A small laugh. 9 years late, but right in time for the wedding. And I stood there with her whole hidden heart wrapped in twine in the cab of my truck, listening to her tell herself she felt nothing, the day before she married a good man, when I had 7 years of her handwriting 15 feet away, proving it was the bravest lie she'd ever told. I opened my mouth to say, the back room's done, you're all set. That's not what came out. You didn't get it out of your system, I said. She turned, half a smile, ready to make it a joke because that's what we do. Sam, 4 times, I said. The first day you were gone. You picked up the phone 4 times and put it down 4 times, and you cried at a foghorn on somebody else's TV because for 1 second you thought you were home. The smile went off her face like a light. The board in your old room came up, I said. There was a tin under it. No, she said, very quiet. Della. No. She was on her feet now, backing into the door frame. No, those were... You were never supposed to... I know. I read them anyway, and I'll answer for that. But I'm not going to hand you your keys and let you drive to a wedding telling yourself you feel nothing. Not when I've got 9 years in my truck telling me different. She put her hand over her mouth, and for the first time in 9 years, the woman who'd hired me and the woman in the letters were the same person, standing right in front of me, with nothing left to hide behind. You weren't supposed to find them, she said through her fingers. Do you understand why I hired you? Everyone said get the cheap man, the fast man, and I heard your name and I said yes before I could stop myself. I told myself it was practical. It wasn't practical. I wanted 3 weeks of you before I closed the door forever. I wanted to be near you one more time where it couldn't count against anybody. And I forgot. I swear to God, Sam, I forgot what was under that floor. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I hired the one man who might pull up that exact board because some part of me couldn't do this without you finding out. I don't know anymore. That's the boat, I said. What? I built you a boat the spring you left. 16 feet, meant for one person. Never finished it. 9 years under a tarp, because finishing it meant admitting you were gone. My voice did something I couldn't stop. Same as you in that tin, Della. Exact same coward. 2 different tools. She was crying now, the way she'd written about crying, like it scared her. You were supposed to fight for me, she said. Not yelling. That was the worst part. Wrecked and quiet. Once. I needed one person in my life to decide I was worth the inconvenient version of things. And it was only ever going to be you. And you told me to drive safe. I know. I said. Ask me now. I'm getting married tomorrow. Ask me now, Della. Then say it, she said. Say the thing you should have said on the dock. The whole harbor went quiet, even the water. I never stopped, I said. Not one day. I built a life shaped exactly like the hole you left and called it moving on. You want to hear me say no? I don't have a no in me. I never did. I was just too much of a coward to make a sound. Right up until you handed me a deadline and I realized I had 3 weeks to finally say it, and I almost let those run out too. And then the screen door opened and Marcus came out onto the step. He'd driven up early for the wedding. Of course he had. Good men show up early. I don't know how much he heard. Enough. You could see it land on him. Not all at once, but arriving the way weather arrives. He looked at her wet, cracked open face. He looked at me. He looked at the tin in my hands. He was quiet a long moment. Good men are when it counts. Della, he said, just her name. A question with no words in it. Nobody yelled. There was no scene. There was just a good man on a back step, the day before his wedding, watching the woman he loved figure out in real time and in front of him that her whole heart was pointed somewhere else and always had been. She turned to him, and to her credit, the thing I'll always respect her for, she didn't lie to make it easier. Marcus, I should have told you about him before I ever said yes. I didn't because I thought he was over. I thought I'd buried it. Her voice shook but held. You're the best man I know, and you deserve somebody whose whole heart shows up. Mine's been in a tin under a floor for 9 years, and I didn't even know it was still beating until this man dug it up with a crowbar. Marcus looked at her a long time, then at me. Yeah, he said finally, soft. I think I've known something was in that tin since the day I met her. I just kept hoping I was the one who'd get to open it. He set the house key on the porch rail, gentle, the way you set down something that isn't yours anymore. I'm not going to marry a woman who's already gone. That's not a wedding, that's a witness. He looked at me, not with hate, worse almost, with recognition. Finish your boat. And he drove away with more grace than I'd have managed in his shoes. There'd be no wedding on the 30th. He'd been 3 weeks and 1 crowbar from marrying a woman whose heart was buried under a floorboard, and he had the decency to be glad someday that he found out on the 29th instead of the 31st. Then it was just us. The water, the empty house, the tin, and a deadline that didn't mean anything anymore. She came down off the step, close enough that I had to look at her. You finished a sentence, she said. 9 years, and you finally finished a sentence. 1 day before I made the worst mistake of my life. I'm slow, I said. You knew that going in. She laughed and cried and hit me once in the chest with the flat of her hand, and then left her hand there, like she was checking I was real. And I put my hand over hers. That was the whole thing I'd been too scared to reach for at 23, and it had been standing 3 docks away my entire life, waiting for one of us to make a sound. I didn't kiss her that day, if you're wondering. That came later, and it was quiet, and it's mine. But I held her hand on that step until the tide turned, and for the first time in 9 years, the silence between us didn't mean goodbye. She didn't drive to any wedding. The house sold anyway. 3 weeks of my work saw to that. But she never left town to close it. She stayed and signed the papers from here, and used the money to do the one impractical thing she'd never let herself do. Nothing. She just stayed. I pulled the tarp off the boat the morning after the wedding that didn't happen. 9 years of dust came off with it. And there it was. The name on the transom stopped part way. 4 letters and the start of a 5th. D-E-L-L and half an A. She stood looking at it a long time, then put her fingers on the half-finished letter, and I watched her understand exactly what I'd told her on the step, that I'd stopped in the middle of her name and left it there for 9 years, because finishing it was a thing I couldn't survive. Finish it, she said. So I did. Took me the better part of that spring. She'd sit on the bucket in the shop and talk at me for hours, and I'd say one word to her 10, and it was the most either of us had ever talked to anyone. I finished the hull, I finished the rigging, and on the last day I finished the name, painted the second L and the A, and stood back, and there it was, whole. Just her name, on a boat built for one person. We put it in the water in June. It floated like it had been waiting to. The letters live in a drawer in our house now. She offered to burn them once. I told her no. 9 years of a woman loving me in the dark. I'm not burning that. I read them the slow way now, one a night, and answer each one out loud to the person who wrote it, which I can finally do because she's in the next room and not in a tin under a floor. And there was one more envelope, the newest, written just before she came home to sell the house, the one I saw the name on and had to put face down because my hands were shaking. It wasn't addressed to me. Every other one said Sam Kessler. That last one said, Della, open when you're brave. She never had been. So one night I opened it for her, and we read it together, and I'm not going to tell you what it said. Some things a man gets to keep. But she signed that one. First one she ever signed. Love, Della. Sent, at last, delivered by hand, across a whole harbor and most of our lives. I think about it more than I should. She hired me to help her leave for good, and handed me 3 weeks and a crowbar. And it turned out 3 weeks and a crowbar were all it ever would have taken, if either of us had been brave enough, any of the 9 years before, to get in the same room and make a sound. That's the thing nobody tells you about the quiet kind. We're not quiet because we don't feel it. We're quiet because we feel it so much we can't stand to risk the answer. So we write it down where you'll never read it. We build it and leave it half finished. We say drive safe when we mean don't go. Don't do what we did. If there's a letter in you, send it. 9 years is a long time to talk to someone through a floor. So let me ask you 2 things, and I do read these. Would you have sent the letters? Or would you have buried them where they couldn't hurt you, like she did? And have you ever hired a reason, any reason, just to be near someone one more time before you let them go for good? Tell me, in the comments. I read every one. And if this one stayed with you, subscribe and stay a while. Because around here, we tell stories about the ones who stayed quiet too long and the love that waited for them anyway. I'll see you in the next one.